Hello, everyone. This is Stacy. Welcome to the landing. Welcome back to the landing. I am thrilled to share with you another gem that I have discovered. For the month of January, I will be sharing excerpts from written histories that I have revisited over the holidays. Words that were written years ago, yet still have a way of resonating and speaking into where we are today. Today's excerpt was written by Joel Hancock on December 23rd, 1990. It was published in the winter 1991 edition of the Mailboat. It is a reflection on change, how change rarely arrives all at once, but instead unfolds quietly, almost unnoticed. Joel writes about how change happens slowly, day by day, season by season, until one day you look around and realize things are different. And whether you welcome it or resist it, like it or not, it becomes simply how things are. As I read this, I can't help but think about our communities, our traditions, and the way life unfolds here, often so gently that we don't realize it's shifting until it already has. So I'd like to share these words with you now, written decades ago, yet still speaking clearly into today. What Happened to the Skiffs by Joel Hancock. Leaving the island this morning to go to Moorhead, I noticed that the refuge harbor was packed full of boats. Every slip was taken, the nets secured, while the fishermen who owned and worked them retired for the Christmas holiday. The sight was somewhat unsettling for a couple of reasons. First, because very few croakers have been caught so far this winter. From what I have heard, the fishermen have had only one good catch since the end of November when the season supposedly began. Usually the month from Thanksgiving and Christmas is the best 4 weeks of the year for gill netters. Several years ago, when I was fishing with my brother Michael, we caught a boatload of croakers almost every day for 2 weeks running. It was pretty much a standing joke that every time someone showed a good sign of croakers, he would call home on the CB radio and tell his wife to go ahead and send that order off to Sears Roebuck, meaning that he now would have money to pay for the COD packages once they arrived. This year, for whatever may be the reason, very few Christmas packages will be paid for by money made selling croakers. Secondly, and even more troubling to me, was the thought that all the boats gathered in the refuge harbor and in the several other small bays on the back north side of Harker's Island meant that few, if any, boats remained moored at the landing, the way they all were when I was a boy. In those days, every fisherman had his boat anchored or tied along the shore directly in front of his home, or at least the path that led there. All along the south side of the island, from Shell Point to Red Hill, the fishing boats lined up like some primitive armada. Prevailing southwesters in the warmer months kept their sterns facing the shore, each one emblazoned with a special name, peculiar to the man and the family for which the boat was the main source of income. Dallas Rose's boat was called the Wasted Wood, for that was what he categorized it as being. Others had names like We Four, The Boys, Seven Brothers, Barbara, and on my daddy's landing, the Ralph. The Ralph was named for my oldest brother, who had been my father's first, and probably his favorite, crew member. Most of the boats were spoken of as if they were a person, always using the feminine pronoun. The family's fishing boat was, in a very real sense, a part of the family. The boats were generally moored between 1 and 200 feet offshore. For that reason, they required something that many fishermen now can do without, a skiff. 12 to 15-foot skiffs were pulled up almost everywhere along the south shore of the island. There probably were more skiffs than there were real fishing boats. Not everyone could afford a big boat, but almost anyone could have his very own skiff. Fishermen used skiffs to get from the shore to his boat. It generally was light enough to enable one man to pull it up on dry land all by himself, especially if he used rollers. Others left their skiffs tied or anchored only a few feet beyond the tidal line, so rolled-up pants were all that were needed to wade to the skiff, even at high tide. Skiffs also served as readily available pack horses that would be pulled behind bigger boats to carry nets, drags, or rakes used by the commercial fishermen, as well as the fish, clams, oysters, or scallops that they might catch. It could even be used to ferry a Banks pony back and forth between Shackleford Banks and the island if a young boy's pleading yielded the desired results. Harker's Island skiffs were all pretty much the same. Some were just a little bigger or smaller than others. They had no flare or dead rise, being the truest of flat-bottomed boats. Each one had at least one oar, generally about 8 feet in length, just enough to push off the bottom anywhere on this side of the channel. They were outfitted with an iron anchor and 50 feet of sisal rope that ran through a small hole cut into the small front deck. The skiffs almost always were made of juniper, the lightest native wood available, to make them all the easier to pull ashore or back into the Sound. For convenience in building, they generally were cross-planked, a construction method much simpler than the lengthwise planking used in bigger boats. They generally had at least one thwart seat, which everyone called simply a thwart. This thwart also strengthened the sides of the boat by serving as a cross beam. There was at least one other feature common to every island skiff, a bailer. Long ago, they were made with wood with a protruding handle. Beginning in the mid-60s, the wooden bailers were replaced by plastic containers, generally Clorox bottles, with a bottom and part of one side cut out. Bailing involved much more than just scooping up water and pouring it over the side. Experienced bailers, the men or boys who used bailers were themselves called bailers, could remove water from a skiff much faster than the modern bilge pumps that since have taken their place. A fast and steady sweeping motion kept at least one bale of water suspended in air all the time. From a distance, it might have appeared that a large suction pump was spitting a steady stream of water from the bilge of the boat. One trick that every bailer soon discovered was that bailing was much easier and more efficient when done with the wind. It didn't do much good to throw a gallon of water into the air if a blustering sou'wester returned most of it into the boat and the bailer's face. Oaring, or poling the skiff, was another art that was much refined by those who used skiffs on a regular basis. Working from the leeward stern, the oarsman would move a skiff fast enough to throw a real wake. Two oarsmen working together could raise a cattail. Before gasoline-powered boats became more common, local watermen poled their skiffs everywhere along the island shore. Some even shoved as far as Beaufort or Davis Island. Luther Willis became renowned for his oaring skills and speed. It was said that he could pole to Beaufort faster than others could go in a sail skiff. Most island boys, including me, got their first real exposure to boating in a skiff. The skiff became their training ground for setting nets and raking for clams, as well as for poling itself. Being able to shove a skiff in 4 different directions without ever changing places was very much a rite of passage for any youngster who hoped one day to be real waterman. But nowadays, it's hard to find a real skiff anymore. Fishermen now drive their pickup to the harbor and jump into their boat from a dock or wharf. The few skiffs that remain are almost exclusively reserved for channel netters and long haulers who use them to transport long nets and staffs. The boats all tied up together at Refuge Harbor may make a postcard scene to someone who wants a picture of the fishing boats had rest for the holidays. But to at least one observer, they serve as yet another reminder of a way of life that is passing away all too soon. Thank you, Joel, for writing these words so long ago that still resonate so well with me. We all know that some changes are harder than others. Some arrive quietly, and some ask more of us than we're ready to give. But change, whether we welcome it or not, is unavoidable. What is up to us is what we choose to hold dear: the stories, the traditions, the places, and the people we don't want to lose. Those are the things worth carrying forward, even as everything around them continues to shift. Thank you for listening and for holding space with me today here on The Landing. Thank you again for joining us to The Landing. This podcast is brought to you by the Core Sound Waterfowl Museum and Heritage Center. I am your host, Stacy Davis Baisden, and today's podcast was produced by April Davidson. Tune in next week as we continue learning, sharing, and remembering together. If you'd like to hear more, check out our previous episodes where you get your podcasts. Until then, stay safe and be kind.